Hello, my name is Scott Peters, and I'm a PhD student at Simon Fraser University. Today, I'll be presenting a co-authored paper on the applications and issues of big data in tourism research. So what really is big data? It's important to think about big data as not just a whole bunch of data, and it's really not a singular entity, but rather a way of looking at data trends and the challenges that they pose. It's more about these challenges that define it, as well as the steps that are being taken to overcome them. It's better to think about it as a loose collection of tools, technologies, and techniques that are trying to address three key areas: storage, processing, and analytics. Now, anytime you dive into a conversation with big data, the three V's of big data will pop up, and that is volume, velocity, and variety. Volume is relatively straightforward. As technologies improve and more transactions are being captured than ever before, the sheer abundance of data starts to outpace the ways in which we can meaningfully process it with existing methods. Velocity speaks to the pace in which data is generated and the processing speed necessary to use this data before it becomes obsolete. Now, variety is perhaps the most interesting and complex of the V's, as data is being generated in increasingly different and often incompatible formats. So it's kind of the puzzle piece of trying to figure out how we can make these data technologies work together. Now, sometimes a fourth V is added, and that's value. And this is just looking at the added intrinsic value of being able to use big data in meaningful ways. Now, it is this value that has really attracted the attention of tourism marketing, planning, and research with a number of emerging trends. In order to make sense of these trends, we separated big data streams into four categories as seen here, and we'll be touching on each of these categories briefly. Search engine data has been used in tourism research primarily to predict tourism volume at a variety of different geographical scales, from tightly bound destinations like resorts and cities to larger tourism regions and entire countries. And you can see an example of that here in Table 1. Now, search engine data does look to be a strong indicator of visitation numbers, and this can be further refined by combining them with other data and machine learning, including data streams like regional weather data, for example. The main engines that have been studied have been Google and Baidu, with the accompanying services of Google Trends and Baidu Index as key data sources. These have been able to be utilized to adjust pricing for variations in demand, to manage different staffing levels, and to more generally anticipate and address periods of unusually high or low visitation to a particular area. These data streams also facilitate search engine marketing and search engine optimization, and these are offering insights into the keyword selection that is used to drive these particular users to websites. Of significant interest, especially to the destination marketing and tourism service industry, are data about web page use, how web pages are navigated, and online bookings. For example, hotel bookings, alternative lodging, or activities like theme parks. Analysis of page visit, return visits, bounce rates, and direct or indirect visits, for example, as well as the sequence of pages visited, offer insight into the expressions of interest and eventual success rates or the bookings, as well as the assistance with product pricing. A challenge here is that these data are usually safeguarded by the entities that oversee them, for example, the hotels, agencies, or web page owners, and this limits their access for curiosity-based research and to establish best practices of analysis, interpretation, and looking into these insights for other industry members. In the age of social media, user-generated content is abundant and growing, but not always easy to directly access. There are two main typologies of user-generated content, and this includes online textual data and online photo data. Online textual data includes things like Twitter, Facebook, blogs, review sites, of which TripAdvisor is the most prominent. And here you're able to figure out the likes, dislikes, perceptions, and price sensitivity of the markets that are visiting these websites. On the flip side, you also have photos. Now, photos have mostly been used now because of their rich metadata, which involves their GPS locations, as well as the times of day that people are visiting these sites, especially if the photos are geotagged. Now, this does provide a new perspective to tourism study and gives some information about preferred spots and traveling plans and patterns. Now, device data includes data capture of a tourist location and mobility through things such as global positioning systems, roaming data, or radio frequency identification. And it's speculated that as the Internet of Things, or all this connection of different smart devices, becomes more prevalent in tourism applications, that device data will generate a massive amount of high quality data. So far, GPS has been the most utilized of these device data, especially with the development of mobile apps that are easily able to replace the expensive and cumbersome standalone GPS devices that were used in previous research. Now, tourism studies, as with a lot of other areas of research, is entering into this exciting period of transitioning from data scarcity over to data superabundance. But it's instrumental during this time period that we don't get too excited and ahead of ourselves, and that we are still able to think about some of the dilemmas that this technology poses. One of the ways we need to start to conceptualize this is when we look at big data stakeholders. Now, there's three different ways you can look at the stakeholders. We have big data collectors, big data utilizers, and big data generators. Big data collectors determine the what and why data are collected, as well as how they are collected and where they are collected from. They can also determine who can access them and how long they are stored for. With this, big data collectors may collect the data with or without purpose, but as surveillance capitalism continues to grow and to be a source of power, it's important to think about who is holding the keys. Now, the big data utilizers are the production side that redefines utilization of the data that is being articulating the needs and wants by imposing order on the data collections and by creating new innovations and knowledge by combining these data sets or otherwise being able to manipulate them into advantageous ways. The big data generators encompass a broad category comprising of the artificial actors, so these are like the sensors, as well as the natural actors, usually people in this context, that voluntarily, involuntarily, or knowingly or unknowingly generate a staggering amount of data. So challenges begin to arise because of these uneven power dynamics that exist between these groups as big data is becoming more commonly adopted and integral to the business and politics of the world. To wrap things up here, new technology, of course, does breed many new opportunities. This is a very exciting time in tourism research. While big data is overall a sunrise area in tourism studies, there are some underexplored areas within tourism studies specifically that have a lot of room to grow. Data generation will only continue to expand, especially with the influence of smart tourism and smart tourism technologies, but it's important to not just get wrapped up into the exciting new areas of the field, but to not overlook the ethical and legal concerns going forward. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can either reach me by email or talk to me on the floor. Thank you.